Before creation, before time itself, who was God? This is the question that shakes heaven and earth, a question that no myth, no philosophy, no science has ever fully answered. We measure everything by seconds, by days, by ages, but the eternal God existed before the clock began to tick. Imagine it, a reality beyond stars, beyond galaxies, beyond even the silence of nothingness, and in that silence, God is. For centuries, people have whispered, "Who made God?" But this question collapses like asking what lies north of the North Pole. The origin of God is not a riddle of time. It is the very foundation of time itself. And this truth is not myth, like the stories of Mesopotamia or Greece, where gods are born from chaos. The biblical God is not born. He is uncreated, eternal, outside of cause, beyond contingency. Why does this matter? Because if God is eternal, then your life is not random dust drifting toward nothing. Your story is anchored in meaning that cannot die. Before creation, before light, before the first breath of man, there was love, Father, Son, Spirit in perfect communion. Creation was not born of boredom or loneliness, but an overflow of eternal love reaching for you. In this video, you will see why the origin of God is the question that reveals the destiny of every soul. You will discover why ancient myths stumble, why philosophers wrestled, and why Scripture declares with thunder, "From everlasting to everlasting, you are God." And now I ask you, what do you believe about the beginning of all things? Comment your thoughts below, because your answer to this question will shape how you live your entire story. If this journey speaks light into your soul, give it a like, share it, and subscribe, because together we are uncovering the mysteries that silence has kept hidden for centuries. Human questions versus divine reality. We are creatures bound by the ticking of clocks, measuring life in mornings and evenings, in beginnings and endings. That is why when the thought rises, "Who made God?" it shakes our reason and exposes our limits. We live in a world where every house has a builder, every river has a source, every child has a parent. So the human heart assumes that even the eternal must have a beginning. But God is not bound to our categories. To ask who created the uncreated God is like asking what lies north of the North Pole, or what existed before existence itself. The question collapses under its own weight. This is the paradox. We think in before and after. Yet the eternal God is before time, not within time. Imagine standing on a shore, watching waves crash, and suddenly realizing the ocean does not begin with the wave you see. It stretches back, deeper and wider than sight can reach. In the same way, the origin of God is not one point among many, but the boundless ground of all being. Think of it in real life. A child may ask, "Who made the sky?" And the parent may answer, "God." Then the child, curious, presses further. Then, who made God? The smile comes, because even in the innocence of the question lies the hint of mystery. The human mind longs for sequence, yet here is the one who has no sequence, who simply is. The lesson for us is humility. Our questions reveal our limits, not God's. Some questions are meant not to trap truth, but to invite awe. The mistake people make is treating God like a creature, another item in the universe, as if he were a star or a mountain waiting to be measured. But the Bible teaches, before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. In this light, the question, who made God, turns into an invitation to see that not all truths can be bent into the small frame of human logic. So let this be a healing word. The fact that God is eternal means you are not lost in a meaningless cycle. Your story is held by hands that never began and will never end. Comment your thoughts. Do you think human questions sometimes blind us from divine answers? This reflection opens the door to a deeper contrast, where myths and legends tried to explain beginnings in their own ways, but Scripture lifts us to a higher vision. Ancient myths versus biblical revelation. Long before Genesis was ever written, ancient voices told stories about the birth of the gods. In Mesopotamia, they spoke of chaotic waters giving birth to deities who then fought for power. In Egypt, gods emerged from a cosmic egg, quarreling and dividing the heavens from the earth. In Greece, the gods themselves were born of titans, caught in endless struggle. These myths share one rhythm: gods born out of chaos, shaping the world out of violence and rivalry. But then comes Genesis, standing alone, declaring not that God was born, but that, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Here, the Creator is not a product of chaos. He is not another voice in the crowd of cosmic beings. He is the voice that speaks creation into order. Picture the difference. In myths, the gods stumble out of darkness, struggling to claim dominion. In Scripture, the biblical God simply is, and His word brings light where there was none. This is why confusing the two is a mistake people still make today, treating the God of Abraham as though he were just another myth, another Zeus or Ra, clothed in different language. But the revelation of Genesis draws a line in fire. God is not part of creation. He is the author of it. He is not born. He is the source of all birth. A real-world example. Think of a novel. Within the pages, characters live and breathe. Empires rise and fall. Tragedies unfold. The people inside that story might wonder, who wrote the world we live in? But the author is not another character hiding in a corner of the book. The author exists outside, before, and beyond the story itself. In the same way, God is not one of the actors on the stage of the cosmos. He is the playwright, the source, the reason the story exists at all. The lesson here is freedom. If God were just another creature, then the universe would be a battlefield of rivals, each fighting for dominance, leaving humanity to be pawns in divine wars. But because God is uncreated, life is not born from chaos, but from purpose. This is why Genesis is not only revelation, it is healing. It tells us that behind the stars is not struggle, but love. Behind history is not accident, but meaning. And this brings us back to our own questions. When you look at your life, do you see chaos, or do you see the hand of the eternal God shaping a story with direction? Comment your answer, because this is where myth ends and revelation begins. And as we move forward, the contrast sharpens. Philosophers and thinkers through the ages would wrestle with this same mystery. If everything seems to need a cause, then must not God also have one? Their struggle reveals the weight of eternity pressing upon the human mind, and from their words we glimpse why faith and reason together point us to the foundation of all being. Philosophers and thinkers, wrestling with eternity. Across the ages, the greatest minds have wrestled with the question of the origin of God, and their struggle reveals both the brilliance and the limits of human reason. Aristotle spoke of the unmoved mover, the first principle that sets everything into motion, yet itself remains untouched. Centuries later, Aquinas sharpened this into the doctrine of the first cause. Everything contingent, everything that depends on something else, must be traced back to a source that is necessary, not contingent, a being who simply is. This is where skeptics often stumble, asking, if everything needs a cause, then who caused God? Yet Christian thought never claims everything without exception needs a cause, but that everything contingent, fragile, and temporary does. God alone is not contingent. He is necessary existence itself, the foundation that upholds all being. Imagine a chain of dominoes falling, one knocking into another. If the chain were endless with no beginning, nothing would ever fall, for no first push would exist. The fact that motion exists at all cries out for an eternal foundation. This is not a mere academic puzzle. It touches the very core of daily life. Think of electricity flowing through your home, lights glowing, devices charging, warmth filling the air. If you trace the wires back far enough, they lead to a power source that sustains it all. The same is true of existence itself. The power of life, the reason there is something rather than nothing, rests in the eternal source who does not receive being but gives it. The mistake many make is treating God as if he were just one being among many, the biggest domino in the line, the strongest link in the chain. But the truth is deeper. God is not one link. He is the ground upon which the entire chain rests. When we grasp this, even faintly, it is like standing at the edge of the ocean at night, waves roaring, stars blazing, and realizing that behind all of this wonder is one who cannot be shaken. The lesson for us is healing and liberating. If God is the foundation, then your life is not built on sand. Every breath, every heartbeat, every sunrise is testimony that you are upheld by eternal strength. And this reality calls for reflection. What happens to a person who builds their meaning only on what is fragile, temporary, and passing? Comment your thoughts. Do you believe the human heart can rest in anything less than the eternal? This leads us to an even deeper revelation, not just about God as existence, but God as love. Was God alone? The mystery of divine love. If we imagine eternity before creation, it is easy to picture God as utterly alone, a solitary ruler waiting in silence. But the truth revealed in Scripture is richer and more beautiful. God is love, and love is not solitary. Before creation, before angels sang or planets turned, there was communion, Father, Son, and Spirit in perfect union. This is the heart of the mystery. The Trinity is not loneliness, but overflowing life. Unlike the pagan gods of myth, who created out of boredom, rivalry, or need, the eternal God creates out of fullness. Creation is not a desperate act to fill emptiness, but the joyful overflow of perfect love. Think of a fountain, overflowing with water, spilling out not because it lacks, but because it is full beyond measure. That is the vision of God before time. Love so abundant, it pours outward into the cosmos, shaping galaxies, breathing life, weaving meaning. This is why the Bible proclaims, God is love. Love is not a quality he sometimes chooses, it is his eternal being. In real life, we can taste this truth in small ways. A mother cradling her child, not because she was forced to, but because her heart overflows with affection. A friend who gives without expecting repayment, not out of emptiness, but because joy multiplies when shared. These glimpses remind us that creation itself is a gift of love. To see the universe in this light changes everything. The stars above are not random sparks. They are candles lit by divine affection. Your life is not an accident. It is a story whispered by eternal love. The mistake many make is imagining God as a lonely monarch sitting in silence, finally deciding to make creatures to relieve his isolation. But the revelation is clear. He never lacked companionship, for his very being is relationship. The lesson here is powerful. If love is the reason for creation, then love is also the reason for your existence. You were not born out of chaos or accident or indifference. You were born out of eternal love that wanted you to be. Let this truth heal your heart. Even in loneliness, you are not forgotten. Even in sorrow, you are held by a love older than time. And this opens a door to the next mystery. If God is eternal love, then to seek him is not to run into silence alone, but into a reality deeper than all names, a vision of the infinite that mystics and prophets tried to glimpse. From here, the journey leads us into the visions of eternity itself, where silence and revelation intertwine to reveal the God who always is. Mystical visions of the eternal. When words reach their limit, when logic falters and silence begins, the human spirit has often turned to visions and mysteries to glimpse the infinite. In Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah speaks of Ein-Sof, the boundless, the infinite without end. It is a truth too vast to fit into definitions, a light that cannot be contained. Christian mystics echo this with their own voices, the cloud of unknowing, where the soul steps beyond what can be spoken, beyond images and reason, into the sacred stillness where God is. To encounter this silence is not to be lost in emptiness, but to be embraced by fullness deeper than sound. Yet there is a danger here. Many, in pursuit of mystical silence, forget that God has spoken, that the same eternal who dwells in mystery has revealed himself in Scripture. Silence without revelation becomes a void. Revelation without silence becomes noise. Together they form the doorway to the eternal. Imagine standing in a cathedral at dawn, light piercing through stained glass, silence filling the air like a living presence. In that stillness, words from Scripture echo, "Be still, and know that I am God." This is not the silence of absence, but of nearness too profound for chatter. Think of real life. When someone you love deeply sits beside you, you do not always need words. The presence itself becomes speech. In the same way, silence before God is not emptiness, but intimacy. The mistake many make is chasing silence as an end in itself, thinking the goal is to escape thought, to dissolve into nothing. But the truth is richer. Silence clears the room of your soul, so the voice of the eternal can be heard. The lesson for us is simple yet transforming. True meditation is not about losing yourself in nothingness, but finding yourself anchored in the eternal word. In a world filled with constant noise, Phones buzzing, screens glowing, voices demanding attention. What greater healing can there be than to enter the silence where God is closer than breath? Reflect. How often do we drown in distractions because we fear the stillness? Comment your thoughts. Does silence reveal God to you, or does it feel unbearable? That question pierces to the heart of our time. And from this mystery of silence and vision flows the urgent reason why all of this matters, not only for philosophers or mystics, but for you, for your story, for your destiny. Why this question matters for us. If God is eternal, then life is not a spark lost in the dark, but a flame lit by eternal love. If the origin of God is uncreated, then your origin is not chaos but purpose, and your end is not nothingness but homecoming. This question, who was God before creation, may seem abstract, but it is the most practical truth of all, because what you believe about God shapes how you live every single day. If you believe life came from nothing and returns to nothing, then despair is logical, and meaning is a fragile illusion. But if you believe life flows from the eternal God, then even suffering and death cannot erase the hope written into existence. Picture two people walking through the same valley of sorrow. One believing the valley is the whole story, the other believing the valley leads to a higher mountain. Their steps feel the same rocks, their eyes see the same shadows, but one heart collapses under the weight, while the other presses forward with strength. What makes the difference? Not the road itself, but the vision of what lies beyond. This is why the origin of God matters. It is the anchor of hope, the foundation of endurance, the reason your story has eternal weight. In real life, when someone faces tragedy, a loved one lost, a dream shattered, they often ask, why? What is the point? If all is accident, there is no answer but silence. But if God is, if the eternal holds all things, then even the unanswered why becomes part of a larger story of redemption. The mistake people often make is to treat faith in eternity as escapism, a way to avoid the pain of the present. But the truth is the opposite. Belief in the eternal gives strength to face the pain, courage to endure, love to keep giving when despair says stop. The lesson is life-changing. Your worth does not depend on wealth, fame, or fleeting applause. It rests on the fact that before time, God already willed you, already loved you, already held your story in His eternal heart. This is why you matter. This is why your life is not wasted. Comment your reflection. Do you believe your story ends in nothing? Or do you believe it returns to the eternal source? This choice defines everything. And with this truth alive in us, we are ready to stand before the final reflection, that God did not wait in time, but is from everlasting to everlasting, and our fragile lives are safe in His eternal hands. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Those ancient words still echo across centuries, reaching into this very moment, speaking not only about eternity, but about the beating of your own heart. Think about it. Before creation, before galaxies, before light itself, there was God. Not an idea, not a myth, not one being among many, but the uncreated origin, the eternal foundation, the wellspring of love itself. And this truth is not far away. It touches you right now, shaping the meaning of your story. If the origin of God is eternal, then your life is not an accident drifting into nothing. It is a journey anchored in eternal love. That changes everything. Picture yourself standing under a night sky. The stars blaze like diamonds scattered across infinite black, and yet even they are not eternal. They were born, and they will die. But the one who spoke them into being does not fade. This is why faith matters. It teaches us that behind every sunrise and every shadow, behind every triumph and every wound, there is a story that began before time and will never end. Your story is part of that larger story. When you feel lost, when you wonder if your life matters, remember, you are seen by the eternal God who was, who is, and who always will be. So what do we do with this? We choose how to live. If you believe life comes from nothing and ends in nothing, then despair makes sense. But if you believe that life flows from the eternal, uncreated God, then even pain has meaning, even loss has hope. Even death is not the end. This is not theory. It is the difference between a life built on sand and a life anchored on rock. Think of the storms that strike every soul: grief, failure, betrayal, loneliness. Without a foundation, the house of your heart crumbles. With the eternal foundation, the winds may rage, but you endure. That is why this truth heals. It is not abstract. It is survival. It is hope. It is love. And here is the mystery that makes it even more beautiful. The eternal God was never alone. Before creation, before you were born, there was love. Father, Son, and Spirit. Perfect communion. Creation is not an accident of chaos, but the overflow of eternal love reaching outward, creating galaxies, creating Earth, creating you. That means you are not an afterthought. You are the fruit of eternal love. To realize this is to breathe differently, to walk differently, to live knowing that your worth does not depend on wealth or fame, but on the fact that before time began, God already willed your existence. That is why you matter. The mystics knew this, even if words failed them. They spoke of silence so deep it swallowed thought, of light too bright to be named, of the cloud of unknowing where God dwells. And yet, Scripture tells us that the Eternal One did not remain hidden, but spoke, revealed, entered history. This is the balance: silence to listen and revelation to follow. Both lead us to the eternal. And when you taste even a glimpse of this, life changes. The trivial seems smaller, the eternal feels closer, and the heart beats with a steadier rhythm. Ask yourself, do you believe your life is a spark in the dark, or a flame lit by eternal love? Comment your thoughts below, because this is not just theory. It is the dividing line between despair and hope. Some may argue, some may question, but the very act of wrestling with this truth already reveals how deeply it matters. If it did not matter, if life were truly meaningless, then why does your heart cry out for meaning? Why does your soul hunger for eternity? The origin of God is not just theology, it is the answer to your longing. And now, if this message has stirred something within you, if it has lifted your soul even a little closer to the light, I invite you to carry it forward. Share this with someone who feels lost. Like the video if it brought value to your journey. Subscribe if you want to keep walking deeper into mysteries that the world has forgotten, but the soul still remembers. And if you feel this gave strength to your heart, Consider giving back a little energy so we can continue creating these reflections together. Every gesture, no matter how small, is priceless to me, because it means these words did not vanish into silence, but became part of your story. Thank you, with all my heart, for giving your time, your mind, and your spirit to this journey. Together, we are building not just a channel, but a community seeking truth in an age of noise, light in the shadows, and eternity in the midst of fleeting days. The God before creation is the God who walks with you now, and the God who will hold you beyond the end of time. Live with courage, live with hope, live with love, for you are held by the eternal,